Hello, everybody. I've got a treat for you today. I was able to get in touch with Dan from Nexus Wargaming, and we just decided to have a conversation about a topic that I think we're both interested in, and that is competitive gameplay for OPR. Now, one thing I want to clarify in our conversation, we are not advocating that this should be a competitive or even a competitive game solely or in the majority or anything like that. We are just talking about an element of competitive, just that, if people want it, it's there, if that and where they can go or what they can do, and the advantages and disadvantages of it. So that's where I wanted the conversation to go, just to see what were the opportunities, if any, for our OPR in the competitive world. Should there be competitive play? And if so, how deep should we get into it? How much effort should be involved? So I hope you enjoy the discussion that we have, and here it goes. I reached out to you because I noticed that you have an affinity for competitive gameplay. That you have I'm assuming a 40K background, went to a lot of tournaments, really enjoyed them, and you're looking at OPR and seeing um, an area of there's a hole in OPR, and I get the impression that you would like to see some competitive stuff going on. Is that correct? Am I wrong in my assumption?
Yeah, I think so. I think that it's so yeah, I do have a background. I mean, I play games, but I do like I mean, I don't consider myself to just be a pure competitive. I both play casual and competitive play. I look OPR because I feel I've sort of said it in the past. I feel that people think that OPR is sort of this beer and pretzels sort of game that's very casual, and it can be that. But the truth is that OPR is a pretty tight game, just from the play style. It really does lend itself to be played competitively. I'll say that, like, unlike a lot of games, in a game of OPR, a lot like chess, if you're better at OPR than the person you're playing against, it shows. Like, it's a very high skill cap game that I think sometimes people think it's a beer and pretzels game when it's not. It's a very tight game. You know what I mean when I say a tight game? It's not very like I said, there's not a lot of randomness in it, so it does lend itself to a competitive game. And I do see people eventually moving towards that. OPR is still in its infancy, so yeah, I think that for myself, while I do like casual play, I definitely see that there is a lot of opportunities for competitive play to go on in OPR. So yeah, that's sort of my initial take on it. Um, I sort of I think with OPR though, there's just so many opportunities, especially with the custom army builder, where there's an opportunity that when OPR's competitive play does go on, we have an opportunity, the competitive group, to create our own armies, to work on our own scenarios, and to really make the competitive scene what we wanted, which is really, you can't do that in any other game, right? No other game both has sort of the custom army builder like OPR does, where the competitive scene really can have their own armies. There's the flexibility in OPR play to be able to play tournaments different ways, and the game is very tight, and so there isn't a lot of this wacky randomness that happens in other games, that can sort of skew the competitive aspect. So yeah, that's a few things why I really do like OPRs. What's the word? There's a lot of there's just a lot of opportunities for us to have a really good competitive scene in OPR. And I am trying to sort of be a voice for that. So yeah, that's just sort of the initial take. How do you what do you kind of feel about OPR competitive casual paradigm, I guess. Yeah.
Well, I'm a casual player right now. When I played Flames of War, I did go to tournaments. I really enjoyed the competitive nature. Um, However, because I did play a little bit of 40K and a little bit more of Warhammer Fantasy Battles, it seemed that the competitive scene was different. It
Mm.
was a different. I guess it was more of an age group where you have with the historical war gamers, you tend to have the more older crowd, more mature crowd, and then when you have the fantasy or the sci-fi, you tend to draw a younger crowd, which can be a little bit too zealous in some cases about winning and taking over. And I guess I'm the type of person that reflects who I play. So if
Mm.
you are competitive and a rules lawyer and so forth, then I'm going to want to do that too and match
Yeah.
that energy. And I didn't enjoy it as much as I did the Flames of War tournaments. In addition to that, the tournament structure used to be really good with Games Workshop, and I think all the other companies followed suit, where they would give out prizes, they would give you rankings, or there was something else besides you show up to a tournament and then whoever wins gets maybe store credit or a ribbon or recognition or whatever it is. There was a regional tournament or local tournament, then you could go to
Hmm.
regional tournament and nationals or whatever. I mean, it was like the NCAA, you know, a tournament where you would really take it seriously, and I think it helped that to make other people be more serious. The problem with that I always had with tournaments was that it exposed a flaw in the game. People
Hmm.
that really studied the game, really studied the armies, would find that the cheesiest list possible and twist it into that tournament as hard as they could, and that's how they would win games.
Yeah.
Um, However, I think that can be useful in OPR. OPR is uniquely designed to overcome that perfectly. What I mean is that if, let's say, I make a list that's completely cheesy, broken, horrible, OPR can fix it instantly. Either
Yeah.
whether they can change a rule, but most importantly, they can change the army books instantly and take that rule out or change it in a way that nerfs that particular combination, so that everybody doesn't try to make the same army, the same list, and it becomes boring. Anybody can
Hmm.
pick any army and be confident that they can be competitive with that army.
Yeah. So there's a lot to unpack there, and I think you've let's kind of hit a few really interesting points that I think we've all experienced. So one, a lot of other games, and I think you pointed out correctly that tournaments, high level play, do expose some of the flaws in a game. And I think while that isn't great for that tournament, I think that is a good thing in the sense that it is a flaw in the design system, right? When someone, I always sort of say that, like, when you design armies or such, if something is just 5% better than the rest of the, let's just say, internal balance, one unit is 5% better. Well, if you have a way that you can bring tons of that unit, that little 5% optimization can just sort of explode into something much more crazy. And we see this, writ large in Games Workshop, right? Wherever it's utter nonsense. So I would say one thing. One thing OPR has to help it is a point system, right? The point system, this sort of point system that ties everything down so that from just a pure optimization perspective, it is more difficult to just sort of make certain units. Like, first of all, you can't make any unit absolutely better than another unit with the same stats, right? Something A unit with the same stats and same abilities is going to cost the same in any army you put it in. So I think that does help curtail some of that. Um, the thing that I would sort of bring a caveat is that you talked about how um, if some sort of optimization happens where someone sees an army that's very powerful, well, OPR can just quickly change it. And what I would say is that it would be a little more difficult, right? When we rely on, let's just say, the OPA. That's what they call this. Apparently there's a group in OPR called the OPA, who I'm not privy to the inner workings of OPR, but that's why I hear them being called. They're called the OPA, and they're an organization that is responsible for balancing the armies, right? Historically, we haven't seen a lot of those changes happen very fast. And the reason that I'm a big proponent of the custom army builder is I think that when you can develop a competitive scene that's away from the casuals, you can make these optimizations a lot more faster. Because the truth is, a lot of casual players, they don't want their army to change constantly, right? They don't want their army changing every 3 months, right? They want their army to maybe change once a year and not a lot. So that's a big proponent. For the competitive scene, I'm a big proponent of custom armies where competitive players can form their own groups, if you will, playtest groups or whatever. And when they do see some optimization issues in armies, they can make those changes, but it's really just for competitive armies, right? And the casuals who aren't doing these uber cheesy lists, they can sort of continue to play their own armies in sort of bliss, right? Ignorant bliss. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's while you were talking, I was thinking about the maybe the competitive people that want to. Now, are you talking the OPA is in house for OPR, or there are somebody
Yeah, that's
that?
that's from what and like I said, I don't. I've heard them being called that. They're the
Yeah, I haven't
one
heard that.
a
I haven't heard that
Yeah,
at all.
that name, and I'm not. I've heard that acronym being tossed around. Basically, I
Okay.
would say whoever is inside of OPR and actually making the decisions to change the armies. Right, there is someone over there who is designing the armies. Right.
Well, I mean the whole thing about setting up the competitive. If I heard you correctly, or maybe I
Yeah. Yeah.
interpret in my head that maybe there should be an independent organization of competitive players that take the official list and make official competitive lists. And then
Yeah.
they
I mean,
adjust it depending on if there's the word out of a tournament that this one unit is absolutely dominating, that everybody's playing with it and they're destroying everybody with it, then they make that adjustment on their own for competitive tournament play. Because what
yeah. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
what I saw with this place in North Carolina, that they said only official OPR lists are allowed. And I thought that was a real missed opportunity because there are people that will get Dragon Trappers Lodge or Mammoth, whatever, who have amazing armies, really cool rules, and people won't be able to use them. They're basically limiting it to the Games Workshop or OPR model armies or proxy armies. That, of course, you can bring whatever models you want, but you still have to adhere to the rules of those armies. Um,
Y-
Go ahead.
Yeah. I think I would say it this way. I can certainly understand why a tournament organizer wouldn't want to allow custom armies or non-official armies to come in because I have done a lot of work in the custom army builder, right? So I'm very familiar with what you can do. And you actually can you can build broken armies with that custom army builder. My general view is there does need to be some sort of outside organization of OPR for competitive plays. And by the way, what I'm talking about is what happens for just about every other game. Whether it's 40K, there has been organizations that have basically set up 40K tournament guidelines. I know this was a big deal in Warhammer Fantasy where they had the comp system going on.
Hmm.
Um, and I played Kings of War for a while, the War Machine. This is just a natural progression that I see OPR happening in the future. And actually, we see the beginnings of it now. I know that I work with people like some of the SoCal people I myself will have a tournament scene. So we already have a lot of independent people coming together and sort of working to create maybe their own custom armies or their own custom scenarios. So I think that that's just a natural progression for all games. If there will be a competitive, separate community who's going to say, okay, the official armies and games aren't very balanced. Let's tweak it, right? In a lot of other cases, they were using things like comp systems, or they would use in tournaments, they would have bad sportsmanship awards, for instance. So there were ways that if a person did bring a cheesy list, they had ways to basically sort of curtail that and say, yeah, you're going to bring that, but that's going to hit you on sportsmanship, and that may cause you to lose the tournament as well. So what I'm proposing is something that all other games systems have had in the past. What I would say is that it's just the custom army builder gives the competitive scene another tool that we haven't had before, which is now the ability to actually tweak the armies, right?
Well,
Now, yeah.
that's why I look at that customizer, the app that they use. I look at it as the One Ring. That
Mhm.
is the tool. All the things that you talk about are, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong or point out to the spot where it won't apply. But any correction that you make from what you just discussed with the comp rules, the bad sportsmanship, can be addressed by simply fixing the army in the app instantly and creating the situation that you wanted in the first place.
Yeah, and let's also be sort of clear. I think that when people, one thing that I have learned, because I do a lot of custom redesigns, that's what I do a lot of work where I take an army and over the months I play this army and play test these armies, I am constantly tweaking these armies, right? So I publish my YouTube content about them, but afterwards I'm changing them. I'm like, oh, this is too weak, this is too strong, let me change this, let me change this, and I get feedback. And I think that sort of feedback is what the competitive needs to sort of balance it a lot quicker. And we shouldn't. The reason I want to do it on the custom army set is because I don't want this to happen to the official armies, where you have a lot of casuals who now their army is changing every few months or here, where they just
Mhm.
don't want to deal with that, right? They're not going to play the uber cheesy lists. And so that's my big point about I'm a proponent of separating the two, right?
Okay.
Giving the competitive players the chance to do their optimizations and then have the casuals just continue to play the official armies, which I always say are good enough. They're not balanced, but they're good enough, you know.
Yeah, I
Um,
mean, I remember you putting on the tier. You're doing the tier lists, and OPR really should be every list is a B. Every single one. That's the only way that you can be balanced is that they're all equal. If you've got S tier armies and D tier armies, then that kind of makes the point that the armies aren't balanced. And OPR, I think, is much more balanced than what we've seen in the past.
mhm.
But that's because they can make that adjustment without worrying about hitting their bottom line. So, for instance, the example that I think of in Flames of War, they came out with Early War, where they would have all the little tanks running around instead of the big Tiger tanks or whatever. And the British Armored Regiment became the dominant. Everybody got the British Armored Regiment. They dominated every tournament, and the game testers in New Zealand were shocked. They were like, "Where did this come from? How did we not see this? What's wrong?" They did. They sent everybody stickers to put in their book to change the point costs because it's a physical book. Either you give them stickers or you give them an FAQ, and people got to keep track of it all and everything. And OPR doesn't have that problem. If there's a catastrophic problem that got past the game testers that now people are exploiting, first of all, it's only known because of the tournaments. When they play tested it in New Zealand among casual guys, they just made up lists that they liked. They checked to see if it was somewhat balanced. They didn't know people were just going to take 50 little tanks and just swarm everybody and blow them up. It wasn't in their calculus of how to make a list. And then once you send, I think it's the Americans. I think America just innately we look for these loopholes to break the list and give ourselves an unfair advantage. And once it hit the American scene and the American tournaments, it became clear this was a problem, and they
Yeah.
spent money to fix it. OPR doesn't need to spend money, and more importantly, the consumer doesn't need to spend money or time or effort or printouts or use up memory cells in order to remember all the changes that are in the book. When you read the book, it's wrong, but
Yeah.
if you read the OPR book, it's correct because they can always fix it.
Yeah, and let's give a lot of the OP or whoever is involved there. I think they've actually done this past year. They have done a lot to actually help balance a lot of their armies more. I think particular alien hives had some strategies that I came up with, and that others have as well, which were just completely broken and unfun, like the ability to create brand new units out of spore mines where you actually move them. You want to miss with these spore mines so you can create brand new spore units and just flood the field. And like it's like what you can't do anything about that, right?
Right.
So I think they have been doing some fixes, but at the same time, I think that to we all want to do what you mentioned, get OPR where everything has a whole bunch of Bs, but that takes a lot of work. That takes a lot of playtesting and it takes a lot of feedback and data. And I don't necessarily know that the OPA wants to take that on, right? And that's the reason that I think the competitive scene, I always say that should be our job. If we're going to, the reason I'm always a proponent of doing the custom armies is because we can internally, play tournaments, get data, and say, oh, this unit based on the data is too powerful. Let's tweak things accordingly. Oh, let's buff this here and there, right? There's just a lot of work that goes into balancing games. And by the way, when I say this, I'm thinking about the future. A lot of people hear me say things and they don't realize that I'm thinking 5, 10 years down the future.
Right.
When we do see these community tournament scenes form up, as they form up with all games. So it's not where we are now, but I think it can get there in the future.
Yeah,
And
yeah. Let me clarify because when I'm talking about the tournament in North Carolina I'm planning on attending, it's not that I'm criticizing them and say they're bad because they're not including other
yeah,
lists. All I'm saying is that here's a problem that I think we need to start talking about and figure out a solution because, like you said, and I totally agree with you that if I'm running a tournament, I don't want somebody come in with this weird Lego army that can blow up. You can't destroy. It's got defensive two and what's that other one that you take away an AP or whatever, and you
mm,
can't ever
yeah.
destroy them, and they've got tough whatever it is that just makes them indestructible because somebody thought about what would be the most broken army and then created it on the custom army, and then they win every tournament that they come down to. You don't want to see that, obviously.
I
And
mean, yeah, and for me, I think you're hitting a point. It's not when I guess destroying is one thing. I know for myself, I play a lot of games with OPR, not just with players, but also I play internally, right? I'll break out like Universal Battles or Tabletop Simulator, and I will play armies against themselves, against myself, basically. And what I'm concerned about is that some of these armies, it's not that they're powerful, but it's that they're not very fun. There are certain strategies that you can do that you can win, which just aren't fun.
like,
No
give
one.
me an example. What are you talking about?
Well, the alien hives, double burrowers, right? The burrower is still a very difficult thing to deal with, and you can bring two of them in 2000. And there's just not, I think the burrower is one of the last few real problematic units where it's tough 18, crap ton of attacks, armor 2, and it can just appear within 1 inch anywhere. So there's no, unlike ambush, there's no real ways for you to counter it. And there's just, unless you have warning cry, which a lot of armies don't, it's just not a lot you can do. And I think that sort of powerlessness is very difficult for people to like. It's almost like you really can't win, or you can't do anything about it. You're going to have a tough 18 monster appear within 1 inch anywhere, hit 3 units with surprise attack, and then just charge and eat something. And then it's basically, so it's I think that's one of the units that I think is still a little unfun to play. Like,
You forgot about regeneration.
well, yeah, I mean, you can stack on, and then of course, I mean, I think the Hive Lord is still very powerful, and the fact that you can stack on regeneration and spell barrier on it,
Mhm.
so that it's got 3 saves. It's got a 2-up save followed by a 5-up regen, followed by a 6-up um, invulnerable save, 2-up against spells is very difficult to kill. Um, but I think the Hive Lord, you can still deal with it. The Burrower and there's a few other combinations in armies that I always say just aren't like they're not very fun to play against.
Right.
And so I think that's the thing for me. A lot of casual players don't care about burrowers. They don't like it's not a big deal to them. But when you do start playing a little more competitive, you see this stuff come out. And like it's you
Well,
know,
I remember when I first got into OPR, the Alien Hives were coming out. I guess the remake of them, and so I started looking at the list, and my eyes were completely drawn to the burrow. I was like, "Holy cow! This is a game winner right here."
oh
So
yeah.
it's yeah, that was pretty obvious that that was a unit that would be a problem. And to my competitive eyes, because I do enjoy making lists. I feel for the guys that make these optimized lists because it's fun to look at and conjure this unbeatable strategy or close to unbeatable strategy because it's a it's a certain challenge to do so.
Mhm.
And so, yeah, the burrow, absolutely. That is definitely a unit that maybe limited to one in an army, or
Maybe I don't even know that
that's it.
one would. Yeah, and that's the thing. People actually ask me about the burrower. They're like, "Hey, how do you?" And I don't know. I mean, and I tell these people, I'm like, well, I really don't know what I would do against it.
Right.
I haven't found a way other than just adding in warning cry. But a lot of armies don't have warning cry, so it's sort of like, hey, if you don't have warning cry, well, just I don't know. I don't really have an answer. Yeah, it's a hard one to deal with. But I still think that the scale of imbalance is a lot less. Like I was it's funny, I follow some 40K news and they have the new Eldar Codex coming out, and apparently it's gonna be absolutely busted, broken, crazy stuff coming out. And I'm like, so I am happy
Par for the
I'm not in
course.
it. Yeah, I'm not in that one. I wonder if it's going to be another Leagues of Votan. I don't know if you heard about Leagues of Votan,
Oh, yeah.
that the codex was so broken that they had to errata it, like so that the
Into
codex came.
oblivion.
Yeah, the codex came out, but like literally between it coming out and them shipping it, they errated it. So the codex landed in people's hands and was already errated. It's like so.
I
Um,
I guess the next issue that let's say you get this group together where you have these official tournament lists. The first problem would be to expand that beyond your local area, so that there can be people that come from another region and still understand what the lists are supposed to be, or I don't know. Understand what I'm saying is that
yeah,
it needs to be universal for people that live far away from you, so they can feel comfortable coming to that tournament and still feel like they're familiar with the list.
I think there can be some universality, but I would say this at the same time, I know other games, every local, like I've always seen it in a like there's a local meta in a like a let's just say a little state or something where they do things a certain way, but you go somewhere else. So there is going to be some differentiation happening you know, across the different areas. The other thing is that, yeah, I think this isn't something that I'm trying to force on the community. It's something that I think is just going to happen naturally as OPR becomes it's just growing exponentially. Um, competitive scene is also going to grow with it, and more people are beginning to move towards that. I know myself, more and more people are starting to reach out to me, say they're using my custom armies, or they send me custom armies, and they say, "Check out this one. What do you think about this one?" So I think I would say for myself, I sort of see this as just a natural progression of OPR, and I think unlike a lot of games, we have the ability to separate the competitive and casual communities, right? I'm a big proponent to say don't mess with the casuals. I actually don't want to change a lot of the official armies too much very fast. I think for casuals, let them sort of do their thing. And then on the competitive side, I think that'll just naturally grow. People begin to create their own, and it happens, we get them constantly, right? They want to create their own versions of the armies. They want to tweak things. So add this, subtract this. And play that in a game, see how it does. Is it too strong? Is it too weak? Okay, let's tweak it here and just sort of go for it. So I just see it just as a natural progression in the game. And luckily, I think because OPR is so flexible, we're not going to run into the same problems that happens with other games, where the competitive scene starts dominating and the casuals basically get pushed out. Because you're right, now they're getting rules updates and erratas every 3 months, and they're sick of it, right? And this happens in 40K for a long time. So yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I couldn't have said it better myself. So, what do you see will happen? What's your prediction on not just competitiveness, but kind of OPR leaving the nest, the home base, the um, expanding from what seems to be very locally played games to people showing up at tournaments or conventions, or how do you see that progressing?
I think it'll progress naturally. So there's a few things. One, I think that casual and competitive players, they aren't they aren't permanently stamped with one sign. They're not. It's not the horoscopes where you're born a certain way. I think that over the course of the years, people are going to become more competitive, become more casual, and there's going to be that bleeding into it, right? I think one of the things that we're seeing, the most importantly, is we're seeing OPR grow. It's getting more traction, becoming more popular, getting new people. Those people will spend the first year or two playing casually. They're going to enjoy it. But as they play the game more, naturally, they're going to want a little more, right? And this is just a natural thing. One of the great things about OPR, it's got a high skill cap. It really does. Like OPR has a very high skill cap. And it's a very tight game, which means that it's very difficult for you to win on rolls in OPR. It's just not nearly as random as other games. This isn't 40K where you can have some crazy spell, or like fantasy, you can have some crazy spell go off and blow up half of the army, right? OPR just doesn't have that crazy variance. And so I think this is just a natural progression that a lot of the casual players we get in today, they're not going to stay casual, right? They're going to begin to play the game more. What's going to happen is they're going to go up against a player who's better than them. It's not even the guy who even brings a cheesy list. He's just better than this person. And that's going to be like this person say, oh, I need to get better at this game. I need to sort of learn it, right? And this is a natural progression that happens in all games, right? Where those casuals are going to find out there is a skill cap, and it's going to give them a reason to work and get better at the game. They're going to optimize their lists. They're going to start going up against other people who optimize their lists. There's going to be an ecosystem of who's a better player, and then eventually it's just going to naturally lead to tournament scenes. So I think that um, what's going to happen is OPR is going to is what's going to happen with OPR is going to happen with just about all games, right? Starting out casual, play competitive, but then I want to step back from the competitive scene. I'm just going to play some casual. It's going to be going in and out. It's sort of fluid. But the biggest thing that I see is OPR growing, and I think that's a good thing. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't. I think it has no choice but to grow. When you talk about how the game functions, that it is And my friend that I play with, we comment about this all the time. If we can point to the move, the decision that led to the victory or defeat. I should have done this, or when you did this, that was the game winning move. It wasn't, I rolled a six here and I won. It wasn't, I remembered my rules better, or I figured out a
Yeah.
cascading effect of a combination of rules because I read the rule booklet 50 million times and figured it out and memorized all these things, and you couldn't. It wasn't a memorization game, it wasn't a dice rolling game. It was, like you said, more like chess, where the moves, the decisions that you made were the ones that led to your victory. The tactics that you used on the board led to your victory or your loss. And I do appreciate that about this game. And a lot of times people will play a game and think it's going to, myself included, I say this all the time when we did it with Flames of War. Um, we looked at the infantry rules and we're like, oh, infantry is going to stink. And then we actually played the game and infantry was amazing. And I started making more infantry lists. You really don't know how these rules are going to interact with each other until you start playing and learning tactics to see how those rules fit within the game. You can't just look at the rule booklet like I did with 40K. That this, in fifth edition when they came out with what was it, the Gray Knights? Is that who they
Yeah.
are? Where they just, okay, you just put the sniper or this guy. I forget what my friend did to me, but he was just like, yeah, you just do this and you win the game. That's I put these pieces on the board, and you really have no chance. You're going to have to roll incredibly well to defeat what I just put on the board. And he didn't do any kind of tactics. He didn't do any kind of combinations of moves to get himself the victory. It was simply what he put on the board.
Yeah, and I think going back to 40K, 2025, I do predict it's going to be a breakout year for OPR. We saw 2024 a lot. We saw the hemorrhaging happen in 40K. Already in 10th edition. And that was supposed to be 10th edition's best year, right? Because this was the year it came out. Now, in this 3 year cycle, I don't know if you follow it, the editions only last 3 years. 2025 is the last full year of 10th edition. So people are already thinking about 11th. And it's really interesting that we're seeing all the promises they made about streamlining and simplifying ninth is gone, right? They're getting codexes come out. All of them have 50 different, detachments or stratagems or something. It's all turning crazy again. And I think that as 2025 goes on, we're going to see a larger amount of 40K players just get tired of it and just leave it. I've been following some of the 40K scene right now, and they're just sick of it. And I think that's only going to bring more people into OPR. So yeah, I see OPR continuing to grow. Um, I could see us easily growing by another 30-40% of our player base, which is pretty huge.
Well, I made a video commenting about your video of um, the survey, and I commented that on something you were talking about, where this year it seems like people that were not 40K players joined in, whereas last year it was 40K players
So
joining in.
it's funny in that
Is that
because it's a small thing. And this is true. There were a lot of brand new players, as best we can tell, brand new players who joined OPR. But we actually did see um, more Warhammer players come in. It's just that we got a whole bunch more new players. So it's funny, there was some growth in some of those Warhammer. They're basically playing with Warhammer models, but it was eclipsed by the massive growth in brand new players. And that's the other thing that OPR has to its advantage. Not only is it going to hemorrhage 40K players and bring them over, it's going to bring in new players, people who would never get into 40K, who are just going to buy the rule book. Maybe they're going to find a person with their friend with a printer, and they're going to pay, I don't know, maybe a couple of $100s to have a huge army. and they're going to be playing OPR, right? $100 if you think about it. So 2025 is a game changer. I think 3D printing is really becoming accessible. I think that there's just, I could really see us growing. And for OPR to put on, let's say, grow by 30%, that's huge. Like, that's insane growth, right? 30% in a year. But I could see that. I could see by the end of next year, our surveys being around, let's just say 2,400, you know, respondents in our survey. That would, well, I mean, that would be like a 50% growth. But you can see what I'm talking about, right?
Right.
2,000, just because it's a comparison. So I think those two things mean that more people are coming in, and more people are going to play the game. They're going to start out casual, and they're going to realize there's a skill ceiling to this game, and they're going to realize that you actually have to learn to get better, and that's like a drug, like, what I mean. It's like Flames of War, and I know other games. When you have a skill ceiling there, oh, people love it. They love it.
Mm.
So yeah.
Well, it's also makes the game more interesting where you can see the action on the board. You don't have to look at the list, you don't have to look at the codex to understand what's happening. You can see, okay, he's getting outflanked there and he's rolling up his flank, or he um, concentrated fire in one area and was able to disrupt a counterattack. Or you can describe the battle in military terms and not what I call lawyer terms. That
Yep.
they it's not that they rule law. There's a difference between rule lawyering where you're trying to get your way on the interpretation of the rules, but lawyer in a sense that you have done your due diligence and you have remembered the rules properly, that it gives you an unfair advantage over somebody who just hasn't had the time to read all these rules and understand all the intricate details of the combinations that are possible.
Have you ever heard the term gotcha win? It's like a gotcha win. It's like, oh, gotcha. You didn't know that.
Got him.
And yeah, you played to the best
Uh,
of your ability, but basically you're going to auto lose because there is a rule that's going to happen.
oh, by the way, this
And
this unit can do auto
yeah.
win. Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about. It's been done to me, and I've done it to other people as well. Unfortunately, I have to admit.
But no, there's a lot of legs in OPR. And I predict this is going to be 2024 was a good year. I think 2025 is going to be a better year.
The if you don't mind, I'd like to expand on the Ranger program. I know that you're also interested in that as well, or did I
Yeah.
hear something? The I haven't heard too much of how they're going to pursue it. I have my opinion that they are looking to get into game stores as a way to expand um, the visibility of the game. Is that your assessment as well?
We don't know a lot about it. I mean, I signed up to be a ranger and I read the little blurb. Um, that is from what, so I have basically, I think it's in its infancy, so I don't fully have all the details. From what I've read, and I've read the same information everyone else has, it seems like they are trying to move towards game stores, but specifically they want to get events more visible, public events more visible. I think OPR sees an opportunity where there's a lot of their player base are playing in their houses, and I think there's an opportunity that OPR, I imagine, sees, which is that if we can just provide some visibility in the local city, maybe all these sort of disparate one, 2 or 3 man groups can realize they're in the same city, and all of a sudden, oh, let's just meet up. And now maybe 2 or 3 friends playing at their home are now at a local game store, and all of a sudden there's 6 people. And I'll tell you, one 6 man gaming group is a whole lot more fun than two or three man groups, right? So I don't, like I said, I know I signed up to be a ranger. I haven't heard anything from them. I don't know what's going on, but it's an opportunity and I fully support it. I don't know what's going to happen with it. But if they can do it right, really sort of supposedly getting some visibility out. In other words, someone can, I think theoretically, go to a site somewhere and find out what's going on. I do know that they did publish some events. I saw this somewhere in their news where they did publish some events that are happening. Um,
That's
one of
how I
them, I think
found
it
out
was,
about the North Carolina place.
yeah, yeah. One of them, I think it was in like in Houston. Um, that's like I said, I think they're still in their infancy. I think that if they can do it right, it can be a really big deal, you know.
Hmm.
So hopefully that'll continue to gain some traction as well. Yeah, yeah. To get some of these people who are playing in their house and give them, I would say this, give them the option to play at a store, right?
Well, here's the problem that I see with it is what is the incentive for the store to support this or to give the space
Mm.
to people? But because there is no inventory for OPR thing, they're trying to get these box sets out, but it's going to be a while before they can really get that going if it does get going. Why would these stores participate in this way? I know there's some of them will, but it's going to be a lot less than stores that have GW. The store that's somewhat local to me, you know, they're okay with it, but they're not going to promote it. They're not going to lift a finger. You show up with your models and you want to play on a table, as long as you're not taking up space for something that they need, they don't mind. They're pretty cool about it. But I'm pretty sure there's stores that are not going to be too receptive. What is there a workaround? Is there a way to convince these stores to allow one-page rules to come in? Is there any incentive that they can have that will help them?
It's sort of a store by store basis. I don't know. It's a broad question to ask. I think the what I would say is the appeal of OPR is that there is a lot of people who would be buying people who are playing OPR in a store have the opportunity to buy any of those models in the store because it is model agnostic. And I think one of the ways they can do it is they can pitch it that this is another way that they can sell their 40K models. And I think that if you pitch it that way, that people playing OPR in a store is an opportunity for that store to market basically any of their models that are at scale, right? I think that is something. Now I know that there are the box sets, but you're right. I don't know that that's going to necessarily reach all the stores. The big thing that I think with stores is another opportunity for them to sell their Games Workshop models because I think a lot of people, as this gets bigger, are going to be playing with Games Workshop models. I play with Games Workshop models, you know. I have bought Games Workshop models after I've been playing OPR because I happen to I build armies based off their 40K versions, and so I want the 40K versions of the models. That's just what I do. So, but that's also something that will have to be worked. And that's the great thing about the Ranger program. It's decentralized. It's sort of like do what you have to do locally, make those connections with your local game store owner. I am lucky that what I did is I got connected with another group, gaming group, and I brought in OPR to them. And what they found, this is like we have a group that plays all sorts of games. So I brought in the OPR groups to them, and all of a sudden they're playing other games other than OPR, right? And so that's another thing as well. Can you join another group that plays all sorts of games, bring OPR in with the opportunity that those players are going to play the other games as well, right? So if you are a ranger, a lot like the name is predicted, you're sort of that independent. What's the word? You're sort of, you have to be resourceful, right? We're the scrappy competitor right now, right? So, like a good ranger, you've got to use everything to your advantage. You know what I mean? You've got to go and I think making a connection with a local game store owner, right? Making that personal connection, maybe offering to promote some of their games, right? Hey, to my OPR group, check out this game that they're selling, right? You know, scratch my back, right? I scratch your back, they scratch theirs. Getting to know your local game store owner is a big way, to do it. But I will say that if you become a ranger, you're becoming the Aragorn, right? Where, you're outnumbered, but you have to be resourceful, right? You got to put on that camouflage. You got to, you got to wield that bow and that sword, right? You got to, do all that stuff. So there's my terrible analogy.
Well, there were two solutions to because I'm just thinking about my situation where there's one game store within uh, really hundreds of miles of my house. If I if I don't go there, then I'm traveling an hour and a half to the next closest store. And so there's two things that I thought would be a solution. I know my local store won't do it, but maybe people that are in my similar in a similar situation, the incentive would be that the store owners can print their own models. That I know OPR doesn't do that, but there are other companies that do, and if they can make money on the printed models, and I always thought that 3D printing out of a store would be a better option because you don't have an inventory. Somebody says, I want these particular models. You say, okay, come back tomorrow and I'll have your models for you. Print them out and then you sell those models. You have the only overhead that you have are the subscription fee for the merchant of whatever company that you're using. And yeah, you don't have to buy that one model that you thought everybody was going to buy, and now it's sitting on your shelf for 10 years. Nobody's buying it. It's just gathering dust because you made the wrong purchase. You made the wrong investment on what's on your shelves. So I thought that would be a good option. But something that they also do in Europe, not Britain. Britain is more like America where we have the game shops and everybody meets there. Um, but they have clubs.
Clubs. Yep.
And I know there's one group, they're historical gamers, I think in Pennsylvania, that they have this amazing building. They all chip in and they all take care of this one building and they all meet there, I guess, all times of the week or whatever, and they play their games there. They don't go to a store. They have their own thing going on.
I think that one other avenue that you can get game store owners on board is that OPR really can be played by casuals. This is really a game that a lot of people who wouldn't get into wargaming because of 40K, they're not going to play 40K, right? Those game store owners, basically, there's a group of people those games they're not going to get because they don't want to play 40K. So there's an opportunity for these game store owners to get people involved in wargaming by starting them out in OPR. Maybe they buy some dice or some plastics thing. I mean, that's the thing. Game store owners, it's not just models. They're selling, a lot of them are selling,
Paint.
paints and stuff. So that's another way that if you're a ranger, you can approach a game store and say, hey, I'm going to get some people who are just brand new to the hobby, right? Who'd never play a wargaming, but they'll play OPR. And by playing OPR, they're going to buy you some paints. They're going to do this, or maybe they just get in the store and maybe they find out they're going to play another game because that's great as well, right? Just because you play OPR doesn't mean you can't play other games. So I think there's a lot of different strategies that Rangers are going to have to use to get their local person on board. And I would say I am lucky in that I sort of the OPR group, we sort of tagged along into another group that sort of has those connections with the game store. But that's also benefited the game store, right? Because now those people who play OPR are now branching out into other games. And people who play other games are coming into OPR. And it's all sort of just sort of flowing. Um, so
Yeah,
maybe like a new game player, maybe like a brand new player night. And like then you target people who are not war gamers, right? And you say, here's a really simple game called OPR. You know, play it.
right. I think also where if you go to a tournament, I think it jazzes up whoever goes there, makes them um, more excited about the game and want to tell other people about the game, and that energy is infectious. but also the stories that you tell. Oh, yeah, we went there, and this happened, and you know, I pulled a rabbit out of my hat, or you know, he was able to turn my flank at the very last second, and it came down to the final roll. It was so close, or whatever. And I think that also brings uh, people into the hobby because they want to be a part of that. They want to be able to have that adventure of going someplace and playing a game, still keeping that casual mentality, but they want to experience something more than maybe just pushing some pieces around the board. They want to have that adventure type feel that I don't know if you get that at the home or even at a local venue. I don't know if I'm making myself clear on that, but
Yeah, well, I think as well, maybe if you're a local ranger, maybe the game store isn't your option. Maybe you do, maybe you do something out of your house, or maybe it's at the library, or maybe there's, like I said, I think that if you're going to be a ranger for OPR, you do have to be resourceful. And if it's not going to be the game store, what other opportunities can you do? Um, so yeah, I don't I hopefully it'll work out. I would say this. I am hoping they really invest in the Ranger program. I don't have a lot of the details about what they're going to. I know they've posted that they've got a lot of plans, but they have said it's early on. Um, I hope they do it right. I would just, that's something I would say. Hopefully they get it right. Yeah.
do you think they should appoint somebody here in America to try to? Because a lot of those
Yeah.
guys are in Europe. A lot of these companies that do the STLs, I've noticed, are in Europe. And like I said, they make their own clubs. They don't necessarily need the stores. So it's a totally different animal over here in America. And I wish
Yeah.
I wanted to succeed, but I'm not sure they understand what the American scene is like.
Yeah, I don't. Boy, that's a question above my pay grade. I don't know. I don't quite. Yeah, I'm not sure. I'm not sure how to. I think the Ranger program, if they can do it right, focus their efforts on that, which is to empower. I know they're supposed to be offering some official support, and supposedly there's going to be a Discord channel about it. I think focusing on that is a good first step. As far as that thing, I think if they can do that, and if they can do it right, that there's a lot of opportunity for success. And I think what they've said they plan on doing in the future is already pretty big enough, which is I think they want to offer like a forum or something, or a page, and then they want to have some sort of website where you can look up events. And then I think they want to have prize support, or some sort of model support for them. I mean, that's a lot into itself. So I maybe that could work on. I do agree there is a cultural difference. I think the owner is from Portugal, I believe, or
Yes,
Spain or something.
Portugal.
Is it Portugal?
Hmm.
Okay. So I don't. Yeah, I'm not sure how all that works. Though. Yeah, that's a bit beyond just my little gamer side. It's a good question though.
Well, I mean, I've noticed that when people from Europe talk about America, they'll come and visit New York and say, "Hey, on Saturday, can we drive down to Los Angeles and see what that's like?" And you're like, "No, you can't do that." Like, well, why not? Because people that I knew in Europe, a friend of mine that lived in the Czech Republic, he's like, "Yeah, we're going to go to France for vacation." And for me, it was the opposite. I was like, "Wow, France? So are you going to take a flight?" And he's like, "No, we're going to drive. It's just a day trip." And it was amazing to me. You're going from Eastern Europe to
Yeah,
France. You're going to
it's
go
very
through
close.
several,
Everything is close.
yeah, much closer, and so that's a different feel. And I really do think that they're looking at America like it's Europe, where if you go to Adepticon, anybody can get there. It's real easy. You just drive all the way up to Wisconsin,
Yeah.
and that everybody can be there that wants to be there. And, if you live in Florida or California, you can't get to Adepticon unless you've got deep pockets and can take a flight up there.
I thought I heard something that they are going to have a presence at Adepticon. So maybe that would be really cool to kind of get OPR.
Well, they were there last year and they're going to be there this year. I think
Okay.
Warboss Fitz is heading it up.
Is he okay? That's
That
great.
that's what I
I
think.
think that's terrific. Warboss is an awesome guy. I think that's great that he'd be running that. Um, I don't know. I think I think that OPR has done pretty well growing organically, and I don't quite know how we're going to get there, but I only see it getting better as long as CW continues to do what they're doing, especially with 40K. I think OPR is continuing to grow.
Yeah, I agree. I hope it does. I'm betting that it will because I put so much into it already.
Yeah, yeah.
So, but any last thoughts before we're here longer than I thought we were going to be? So.
No, no, Les, I appreciate you having me on. And yeah, I guess we will just see. I think 2025 is going to be the breakout year, and I especially with the Ranger program, if OPR is listening, if that Ranger program can really get off the ground, I think that that could be some explosive growth.
Well, I guess we could end off with what's next for Nexus Wargaming. What are you looking to do in 2025?
It's funny. I've been following some of your regiments content. I do want to get back into regiments. I've took a lot of 2024, and I said this, I'm going to focus on Grimdark Future, getting a lot of my competitive redesigns out there, testing them. I am going to branch out into some regiments. I'm still going to do Grimdark Future, but I'm really interested in regiments. Um, and some Trench Crusade. I'm working on my warband now. I'm going to be doing a few more skirmish games as well, but it's going to be some OPR and Epic, which is my two big games. But I am going to be going back into some regiments, which I think they've made some improvements, and I'll be doing some tweaks as well. So yeah, yeah.
Nice. Well, welcome to the fight. This time I know our side will win.
Hey, thank you so much.
No problem.